A shocking confession from Jungkook about Taehyung shatters the silence backstage, leaving Coldplay's Chris Martin in tears. What secret could do that? "He's not coming back," Jungkook said, his voice cracking like glass under pressure. The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was the roar of 1,000 unspoken truths. The studio, dimly lit by amber stage lights, suddenly felt like a confession booth. Chris Martin stood frozen, his hands still lingering on the piano keys, as the last note they played together trembled into stillness. Rain pelted the windows like drumming fingers. The air smelled faintly of sweat, incense, and the sour metallic scent of old microphones. It was meant to be a rehearsal for a surprise collaboration BTS and Coldplay together again, but it had become something else entirely, something raw. Chris turned slowly, searching Jungkook's face for signs of irony or mischief. None. The younger man's jaw was clenched, his eyes rimmed red. His hands, tattooed and trembling, were balled into fists at his side. "What do you mean, Jungkook?" Chris asked quietly, the British calm in his tone barely masking the storm beneath. Jungkook looked down, as if the floor might offer a better version of the truth. "He left a note. 2 weeks ago, Taehyung walked out of everything. The group, the contract, me. There was no warning, no press release, no whisper of scandal. For the world, BTS was still whole radiant, united, iconic. But in that small, sterile room with instruments scattered like memories, reality fractured." Chris stepped forward slowly, like approaching an animal in pain. "But the interview, the Paris project, you said he was in." Jungkook nodded. "He lied to everyone, even me, especially me." Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, everything was unraveling. As Chris sat down beside him, Jungkook finally exhaled, the kind of breath that feels like drowning. "He was scared," he said. He couldn't take it anymore. The fame, the scrutiny, the feeling that he was performing even when the stage was gone. Chris didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was a sanctuary. Jungkook reached into the pocket of his oversized denim jacket and pulled out a small piece of folded paper worn at the edges. He handed it to Chris with the hesitance of someone offering a loaded gun. Chris unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable elegant, messy in places, but deeply familiar. "To anyone who finds this, I love you. But I've forgotten how to love myself in front of the cameras. I'm leaving before I forget who I really am. Please don't look for me. V." Chris's hands trembled. The note slid from his fingers like autumn leaves, landing silently at his feet. "I tried to stop him," Jungkook whispered, "but he already had one foot out of the door. The last thing he said to me was, 'Promise me you won't follow.' And he didn't. Not physically, but in every lyric he wrote since, in every stage he stepped on without that singular presence by his side, Jungkook had been chasing a ghost." Chris wiped his eyes roughly with his sleeve. "You're not alone, you know." Jungkook gave a hollow laugh. "Aren't I?" Their eyes met, two musicians from opposite worlds, bound not by genre or fame, but by the shared ache of losing someone who chose to disappear. The studio door creaked open suddenly. A staff member peeked in, oblivious to the gravity in the room. "You guys ready for sound check?" Neither answered. The staffer nodded awkwardly and left. Chris picked up the fallen note, smoothing it gently. We can't let this be the end of his song, Jungkook." But Jungkook's eyes were distant, haunted. "You don't understand. This wasn't just about him walking away. There's something else. Something he found. Something he was afraid to share." Chris's heart thudded. What did he find? Jungkook paused, the weight of what he was about to say etched into every line of his face. "I think he found something that could destroy us all." And for the first time since they'd entered the studio, the silence was real. "You think he found what?" Chris's voice sliced through the silence like a broken string. Jungkook leaned back against the studio wall, the soft leather of the soundproof padding pressing against his shoulders. His eyes didn't leave the floor, but his lips trembled as though each word he held back was a ghost banging to be let out. "I don't know exactly," he said finally. "But it wasn't just burnout. I thought it was at first. I thought he needed space-time to breathe, to be human again. But then he called me, once, a week after he left." Chris's brow furrowed. "He called you?" Jungkook nodded. At 3 a.m, his voice was shaking like he was freezing or terrified. He said just one thing. "If they ask, tell them it was my choice. No one made me disappear. No one but me." Chris rubbed his temples, the weight of the note still echoing in his mind. Why would he say that unless someone had made him disappear? Jungkook looked up, his eyes finally locking on to Chris's. Exactly. The tension between them hung thick as fog. The room, once humming with the promise of music, now pulsed with a darker rhythm-unspoken truths, unshed tears, unplayed notes. "I went to his apartment," Jungkook continued. Everything was gone. Not just his thing she sent, his energy. Even Bam, his dog, was missing. It was like he'd never lived there, like the place had been scrubbed clean of his existence. Chris's face paled. That's not someone running away, that's someone being erased. Jungkook's knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists. That's what I'm afraid of. There was a sharp knock on the studio door before it creaked open again. This time it was Yoongi, his face unreadable. His eyes cold with calculation and fatigue. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at Jungkook. "I heard what you told him," he said flatly. "Why didn't you tell us?" Jungkook's voice caught in his throat. "Because I didn't want it to be true, and I didn't want to put anyone else in danger." Yoongi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Danger? What the hell are you talking about, Jungkook?" Chris stepped between them, gently but firmly. "Yoongi, wait, there's more to this than just Taehyung vanishing. He left a note, he made a call, and now it looks like someone's gone out of their way to erase him." Yoongi's jaw clenched. "You think this is some kind of conspiracy?" "I don't think, Young," Jungkook said softly. "I know." A heavy silence settled over the room again, broken only by the buzz of the mixing board's idle hum. Chris sat down at the piano again, his fingers lightly brushing the keys, pressing a chord without playing it fully. "We need to find him." Yoongi scoffed. "You think we haven't tried? We pulled every string we could without alerting the media. But there's nothing. No flights. No CCTV, no digital trail. It's like he stepped off the planet." Jungkook looked at him sharply. "That's not true!" Yoongi turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Jungkook pulled out his phone, unlocking it with a fingerprint that trembled slightly. He opened his encrypted folder, a feature Taehyung had shown him late one night when they were talking about privacy. About the need for artists to keep parts of themselves locked away. He handed the phone to Yoongi. This was sent to me 2 nights ago. No sender ID, just this. Yoongi pressed play. A grainy video began to load. Static. Then a flash of dim Lightinga subway tunnel, maybe. A man walking quickly, head down, scarf covering his face. A security camera angle. He turned for half a second. It was Taehyung. Not smiling, not calm, not himself. Behind him, 2 men in black followed, keeping their distance but clearly following. The footage ended. Yoongi's face went white. Holy shit, Chris muttered. There's more, Jungkook said, swiping to the next file. An audio clip, faint breathing, then a voice, barely above a whisper. Jungkook, if you got this, it means they didn't catch me yet. I don't know how much time I have. I need you to stop looking for me. Not because I don't want to be found, but because... Static cut him off. The recording ended. Yoongi sat down slowly, like the weight of it all had crushed his knees. Who the hell is after him? Chris whispered. And what does he know that makes him this dangerous? Jungkook walked over to the far corner of the room where Taehyung's favorite guitar still rested, untouched. He ran his fingers over the strings, drawing a ghost of a melody. There's one more thing, he said. He left something behind that wasn't in his apartment. It was mailed to me. No return address. He pulled out a flash drive from the inner pocket of his hoodie. It was painted with red nail polish, a habit of Taehyung's when he wanted to mark something as personal. I haven't opened it yet. I couldn't. I was scared. Chris stood. We open it now. They plugged it into the studio laptop. A folder popped up labeled only with a single character, V. Inside, one file. A video. No date, no title, just static. Jungkook double-clicked. The screen lit up. Taehyung appeared, sitting in what looked like a hotel room, shabby curtains, dim lamp, cluttered table. His face was thin, his eyes were wild. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. If you're watching this, he began, then I didn't make it. Jungkook staggered backward, but Chris caught him. I found something we weren't supposed to see. I thought it was just a story at first, a weird rumor from a sound engineer at one of our old studios. But then I looked into it, digging deeper, and I found recordings of us, private conversations, studio sessions that were never meant to be shared. Yoongi leaned in, pale as ash. Taehyung continued, his voice growing more ragged. There's a project, codename Echo Light. It's not just about surveillance, it's about manipulation, editing, rewriting our voices, our images, even our personalities. Deep fake shiper realistic simulations of us doing and saying things we never did. He reached off screen and held up a small device. This is proof. But if they find out I have it, suddenly the screen glitched. A loud bang. Taehyung's eyes widened. The screen went black. Chris slammed his fist onto the piano. God damn it! Jungkook was breathing hard, as if he'd just run for miles. Yoongi stood and walked toward the window, staring out at the storm that now raged over the city. They're not just erasing him, Yoongi said quietly. They're replacing him. Jungkook wiped his eyes. That means we have to find him before they do. Chris looked between them. I'm in. Whatever this is, whatever it costs, we're not letting them take him. Just then, the studio door flew open again. This time, it was Namjoon. His face was grim. "You guys need to see this." He held up his phone, a live news feed. Breaking: Kim Taehyung spotted in Moscow nightclub exclusive interview at 9 p.m. It was him, his face, his voice, speaking fluently, smiling. Only it wasn't. Jungkook stepped forward slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "That's not Taehyung." The storm outside grew louder, and somewhere in the shadows of a world built on images, lies, and music, something dark was stirring. "You're telling me that's not him?" Namjoon asked, breath short, eyes glued to the screen. The room had gone still again. Everyone watched the broadcast from Namjoon's phone in horrified silence. The footage showed Taehyung, or something that looked like him, walking confidently through the entrance of a lavish Moscow nightclub. He was flanked by bodyguards, cameras flashing all around him. His voice echoed crisply through the television studio, answering questions with poise and charm. Every gesture, every smile, every blinket was perfect. Too perfect. Jungkook shook his head. "That's not him. That's not how he moves. Look at his left hand, it's not twitching. Taehyung always rubs his left thumb when he's nervous in public, and that thing is calm." Chris Martin whispered, "You think that's the Echo Light tech he was talking about?" Yoongi let out a low whistle. "They deep-faked him! King deep-faked our brother!" The idea sounded insane, like something out of a Black Mirror script, but the footage in front of them was undeniable. This wasn't just CGI, this was immersive, real, no uncanny valley. No visible stitching of pixels. It was him until you knew better. Namjoon turned off his phone and dropped into a chair. His usual calm was gone, replaced with the quiet fury of a man who'd just seen his family violated. "We need to find out who's behind this," he said, "and I think I know where to start. They flew out of Seoul under the radar that same night, using private transport arranged not through any label, but through connections Chris had kept quiet even from his own management." Jungkook sat in the back of the jet, knees drawn up to his chest, earbuds in, not listening to music, but to Taehyung's last voice message on a loop. Yoongi didn't sleep. He scoured forums and hacker communities, using burner accounts to try and trace the digital fingerprints left behind in the Moscow video. Chris kept sketching out timelines, trying to connect the moment Taehyung vanished to when the Echo Light tech must have started gaining traction in the underground. Namjoon sat with a notebook open in front of him. Pages were already filled with timelines, code names, and one name circled over and over again: Elias Kim. Elias was a South Korean AI prodigy turned media ghost. Once celebrated for his work in voice synthesis and realism mapping, he'd vanished after a quiet scandal a few years back. There were whispers that he'd been hired by a government faction, maybe even something more corporate and less legal, and Namjoon remembered the day Taehyung had mentioned him casually during a meal in Tokyo. Something about a project that could turn a person into software. They landed in Zurich. From there, a contact led them to an underground lab nestled in the shadows of the Alps, glass, steel, and silence. The lab was hidden behind the facade of a sound engineering institute. Only when you passed through 3 biometric locks did you reach the level where sound wasn't just studied, it was recreated. They didn't have appointments, they had leverage. Chris slammed down his credentials, old collaborations, the Coldplay name, and a quiet whisper about reputation management for a client. The man who greeted them was tall, pale, and far too young to look so jaded. Dr. Min Se. Eyes like data screens, hands that hadn't touched sunlight in weeks. He took one look at them and said, "You shouldn't have come." Jungkook stood. "Where is he?" Dr. Min sighed. "I don't know where the real Taehyung is, but I know where his voice is being kept." Silence exploded like a bomb. He brought them into a soundproof vault. Inside, hundreds of digital files hovered in thin air, 3D projected audio waveforms. Each file was labeled with a name. Not real namescode names, but some were unmistakably familiar. Kim, 5, Prototype, 3.4, JK, Loft, Loop, RM, Calm, Emo. "They scanned your voices from every public and private source," Min said. "Even from unauthorized studio feeds. They compiled tone, pitch, emotion, micro breaths, everything. Then they ran simulations. Use neural decoders to project. Not just what you say, but what you would say. It's like digital puppetry." Chris's face was ashen. "Who is behind this?" Min hesitated. "It's no longer just one company. It started as a project for media preservation AI musicians, immortality of artistry. Then the K-Mirror Group stepped in. Private investors, political influence, blackmail systems. They saw what this tech could do to public figures, artists, even diplomats. Imagine a leader saying something on video that they never said and the world believing it. Namjoon took a step forward. "Why Taehyung?" Min looked at Jungkook. "Because he was the only one who traced it back to the server origin, and he threatened to expose it." Yoongi swore under his breath. Jungkook walked up to the files and stared at the waveform titled Kim 5 Seoul Patch. It was glowing faintly red, active, recently used. Min said quietly, "He left behind something before he disappeared. A passcode. I don't know what it unlocks, but I know he embedded it into a track. Not lyrics, not metadata. Into the silence between notes." Chris's head snapped up. "He always used to say silence was sacred." Yoongi whispered, "Then maybe silence is the only place he could still hide." They took a decrypted copy of the last file Taehyung ever mixed. A solo demo never released. It was simply titled Muse. Jungkook played it once through, headphones on, eyes closed. It was beautiful, haunting. Every note trembled with sincerity, but it was the silences that clung like ghosts. Chris suggested a spectral analyzer. Namjoon mapped the gaps between frequencies, and there hidden between two low-frequency harmonics was a series of tonal pulses. Morse code. They translated it. Lumen. Follow the shadow that speaks. It was a riddle, but Namjoon knew what Lumen was, a defunct label in Paris that had once tried to sign BTS during the early days, known for its obsession with synesthesia in music. It had been shut down mysteriously after a fire destroyed its vaults. Or so the public was told. They flew to Paris that night. The old Lumen building was abandoned, locked behind construction scaffolding, and sealed with fake radiation warning signs to deter squatters. But inside they found a studio untouched by time. Dust lay thick over synthesizers and broken guitars. But the walls were lined with drawings, photographs, and in the center, One giant map of the world thread pinned from city to city, each one marked with Taehyung's handwriting. It wasn't just about escaping. He was following something, tracing it. A shadow. Chris turned slowly. There was a phrase painted on the wall in Taehyung's brush script. The real me was never the one you saw. Jungkook stared at it, tears silently slipping down his cheek. He knew they'd try to take his identity, so he burned the false one first. A door creaked behind them. They spun, fists clenched. A figure stood in the shadows. Messy coat, eyes hollow with exhaustion, a limp in his left leg. It was Kim Taehyung. Not a video, not a voice file. The real one. He looked at them all, expression unreadable. Then he spoke, voice low, hoarse from silence. I told you not to follow. And then he collapsed. The sound of his body hitting the floor echoed too long in the empty space. Jungkook was the first to reach him. He dropped to his knees, pulling Taehyung's limp frame into his arms, heart pounding so loudly he could barely think. Hyung, hey, look at me, Taehyung, look at me. Taehyung's eyelids fluttered, his lips moved, but no sound came out. His body was burning up, yet he was shaking like he was frozen. Jungkook pressed his forehead to his friends and whispered over and over again, "You're safe now. You're safe." Namjoon called for an emergency contact, one of the last remaining allies they trusted in European doctor who once toured with them as part of BTS's wellness team, but who'd left the industry after an expose nearly ruined her life. Dr. Valerie Noiret. No one knew where she had gone after that scandal, except Taehyung apparently, because there she was an hour later, walking into the cold warehouse space like a shadow from another world. Her medical bag slung over one shoulder, the other hand holding a long curved cigarette she never lit. "He's been drugged," she said after checking his vitals. Not opiates, not benzos, something harder to trace, synthetic, likely experimental. She looked up at them with eyes dulled by too much experience. "He's not overdosing, he's being kept quiet." Yoongi clenched his fists. "Silencing drugs? They're still using that shit?" Valerie nodded. "In some circles, usually on whistleblowers." Chris sat down, stunned. Jesus Christ! Taehyung stirred again. His eyes opened for half a second unfocused, glassy, and then rolled back. His mouth twitched, and a single word slipped through like a ghost. "Don't." Jungkook leaned closer. "Don't what?" Taehyung's hand trembled against his chest, trying to lift, to reach for something invisible in the air. His lips moved again. 2 syllables, barely audible. "Lumen Lie." And then he was gone again, slipping into unconsciousness. Yoongi paced like a caged animal. He walked into this trap trying to stop them, and we followed his footsteps right into the lion's den. Namjoon leaned against the wall, staring at nothing. No, he knew we would. That's why he left the trail. Not to warn us off, but to make sure someone knew. So that if he couldn't get out, someone else would finish it. Dr. Noré adjusted an IV drip from her kit, hooking it into Taehyung's arm with practiced grace. "He's stable for now, but his nervous system's been through hell. He's been on the run, hasn't he?" Chris nodded. "Months. Then you have days, maybe hours, before whoever was following him realizes you found him first." Jungkook's voice was hoarse. "What do we do when they come?" Valerie exhaled smoke she hadn't inhaled. You give them something else to follow. Jungkook stood slowly, eyes burning. No more running. They took his name, his face, his voice. They tried to replace him. We go after them. Namjoon looked up. And do what? Confront them with feelings? They don't care. They've weaponized perception. They could launch a new Taehyung tomorrow and no one would question it. Hell, people might prefer him. Chris rubbed his face. We're talking about fighting a machine that prints truth on demand. If the fake version of him appears on a live stream tomorrow, smiling, laughing, singing, and the real him is barely breathing on a mattress in a broken studio, who do you think the world will believe? Jungkook didn't blink. Then we show them something the machine can't fake. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Like what? Jungkook looked over at Taehyung, his voice barely above a whisper. His soul. Valeri left them with a warning. He'll wake up. He might not remember everything, and when he does, it will come back like fire. You need to be ready for him to break. She gave Jungkook a vial. If he starts convulsing again, this will stop it. But it'll also knock him out. Use it only if he's about to collapse again, not before. When she left, they set up a small perimeter inside the abandoned Lumen studio. Chris and Namjoon worked in tandem, encrypting every entry point they could find, physical and digital. Yoongi installed makeshift surveillance using old cameras still wired to the underground building's grid. The air was thick with tension. Taehyung didn't wake until 2 nights later. It was Jungkook who was with him when he stirred. No words, just a look. Recognition like a spark, a storm. Taehyung's eyes found Jungkook's, and the dam behind them shattered. Where? His voice was like sandpaper. You're safe, Jungkook said, brushing the hair from his face. You found us. Taehyung's jaw trembled. No, they let me. Jungkook froze. What? Taehyung tried to sit up, pain shooting through his back. They knew I was heading here. They wanted me to find you. The others rushed in as Taehyung sat fully upright, his eyes suddenly wild again. You don't get it, he said, staring at the wall as if it might collapse. They don't want to hide anymore. They're going public. Lumen was just a prototype. Echolight is already in beta testing on live humans. Me, you, celebrities, politicians, children on TikTok. Every sound, every facial twitch you've ever made in front of a lens, they fed it to the machine. Chris whispered, That fake version of you in Moscow, was that the beginning? Taehyung nodded. They used my face because it's familiar, safe, a perfect prototype to measure audience acceptance. Yoongi sat slowly. What do they want? To replace us, Taehyung said. Not kill, replace. If the world has a more predictable, more obedient version of me who smiles when he should, who never questions fame, who sings on Quethale, want that version. And when the real me tries to speak up, they'll call me ungrateful, crazy, washed up. Namjoon finally spoke. Then we force the world to see the difference. Taehyung looked broken. How? You saw the Moscow video. That wasn't me. But it looked more like me than I do right now. Chris stared at him, something flickering behind his eyes. There's a way. Everyone turned to him. A concert, Chris said. Not just any concert, a hybrid live show with impossible footage glitching in real time, the real Taehyung on stage, but with the AI version trying to interrupt streaming globally. Let the world see them side by side. Let them feel the difference. Yoongi stood. You're talking about hacking the Echolight stream? Namjoon shook his head. That's suicide. Jungkook said softly. No, that's war. Taehyung closed his eyes. Then give me 5 days. And a mic. The plan was insane. Suicidal. But it was the only thing that made sense. The world loved a show. And it would take something larger than reality to prove what reality even was anymore. They found an old cathedral-turned performance hall deep in the outskirts of Berlin, where the internet signal was weak but stable enough to control. Chris reached out to his people. Namjoon pulled strings. Yoongi coded night after night, slicing into Echolight's infrastructure, preparing a viral glitch that would override their stream at the exact moment Taehyung went live. Jungkook never left his side. They rehearsed the set list together, line by line, but Taehyung refused to repeat lyrics more than once. If I rehearse it too much, he said, I'll sound like them. On the 5th night, they went live. The audience filled with invited journalists, influencers, and fans who had no idea what they were walking into. The show opened with a projection of the Moscow Taehyung, polite, perfect. The crowd cheered. Then the glitch began. The face twitched. The smile froze. A real spotlight turned on. And there stood the real Kim Taehyung, sweating, gowned, eyes blazing. He didn't speak. He sang. Not with perfection, not with polish, but with raw, trembling pain that cut through the air like a blade. The projection flickered again. It tried to override the feed, showing a smiling version laughing, bowing, winking, but the real voice overwhelmed the sound. And when Taehyung collapsed at the end of the final note, the crowd wasn't silent. They screamed. Not in horror, but in awakening. Across the globe, the stream was cut. Echolight servers crashed. But the seed had been planted. The world had seen both faces. And some, for the first time, learned to ask which one had a soul. The world didn't end, but it tilted. In the hours after the concert, the footage of Taehyung's performance spread like wildfire, spliced, analyzed, compared side by side with the perfect projection that tried to override him on stage. Frame by frame, viewers spotted the inconsistencies. The AI's flawless symmetry, the micro delays in emotional reaction, the absence of vulnerability. In contrast, the real Taehyung trembled, cried, cracked on high notes, and looked straight into the camera not to perform but to connect. And for the first time in months, the world believed him. But belief wasn't protection. Less than 12 hours later, the servers hosting the viral clips began disappearing. Content was pulled from platforms without warning. Accounts that reposted the concert were suspended, demonetized, shadow banned. News outlets that covered the performance retracted their stories after sudden legal concerns. A few brave voices held the line, but they were buried in noise-sensational headlines, influencer scandals, fabricated leaks from a former BTS member. Namjoon watched it unfold from a cafe window in Copenhagen, his tea untouched. They're rebuilding the lie, he said quietly. Chris Martin sat across from him, scrolling through a news article claiming Taehyung's hologram malfunctioned during a planned experimental media event. He tossed his phone onto the table. They're trying to frame it as art. His voice dripped with disgust. They're pretending it was all intentional. It was, Namjoon said. Just not by them. Back in Berlin, the team had scattered after the performance. Yoongi left first, disappearing without a word, no doubt to begin digging from the shadows. Chris returned to London, where a discreet Coldplay statement offered solidarity with all artists fighting to protect their voices. It never mentioned Taehyung by name, but everyone knew. Jungkook stayed with him. Taehyung hadn't woken up since the concert. His body had given everything. The emotional strain, the chemical suppression from months of running, the final flood of adrenaline broke him down to the rawest pieces of humanity. Dr. Noire returned and administered round-the-clock care. She said it wasn't a coma, but deep neuro shutdown, like the body was giving the soul time to catch up. Jungkook never left the room. He slept beside the bed, played guitar at night, spoke softly when the silence got too loud. He told stories, some real, some made up. Some just whispered memories of days before the world started breaking. Sometimes he read letters from fans. He didn't say their names,